Hi, happy Thursday. Welcome to KB Fit Britt Live. Today we're talking about stretching and strengthening the hip flexors. I see that Crystal's here. Crystal is ready to go. Say hi in the chat when you join. This was a requested topic last Thursday. You guys were really excited about this, so hopefully some of you are returning to catch this live, or maybe you're watching it later to get all the tips on stretching and strengthening your hip flexors. Hey, South to West, thanks for joining. So, why is hip mobility important? Why are we covering this today? Well, this is probably one of the most common things I've heard in terms of flexibility as a personal trainer, as a coach, is my hips are tight. I want more mobility in my hips. I want more flexibility in my hips. Hi, Crystal, thanks for being here. So, because it's such a common question around hip mobility, it's always a good one to go over. I think it's not necessarily common knowledge for many of us. I learned this some years ago as I was learning more about mobility, that mobility is not just about static stretching or passive stretching. That's known as flexibility. And to have true mobility, you need to have strength through your range of motion. Your nervous system also plays a large role in both your flexibility and your mobility, your ability to access a particular range of motion. Your nervous system will cause you to feel stiff or tight or like you can't access an area if it doesn't perceive it's safe to go there, if you haven't built up the appropriate strength to get into that position, okay? So we kind of have to talk to the nervous system as we do flexibility and mobility work. I'm sitting on this bouncy ball over here. It definitely makes it more fun to sit down if I can like bounce up and down. Hi DJ, thanks for joining. We're just talking a little bit about hip mobility, why it's important, why it's what we'll be covering today, and then I'm going to take you through some different mobility exercises, from joint mobility to specific mobility exercises that are going to help you stretch and strengthen your hips. So, as I mentioned, stiffness can indicate either a lack of flexibility, like just being able to access the range of motion, and or strength. Okay, if you can't even access the range of motion, then you definitely don't have a ton of strength there. But just because you can access a range of motion also doesn't necessarily mean you have great strength or control over that range of motion, which is that mobility we're looking for, where you can just, if you want to touch your toes, ideally you want to just reach down and touch your toes. You don't have to warm up for 30 minutes so you can slowly, okay, now I can reach my toes. If you have good control, if you have mobility, you should be able to do it cold. Okay, if you have to warm up into it, then that would probably be more like flexibility, okay? So ideally, we get to a place where we're able to access ranges of motion without warming up. So your hip mobility, of course, can affect how you feel. It can very often affect how your lower back feels, because if your hips are locked up, your lower back is generally going to compensate for what's going on with your hips. As well as, if you have knee issues that can come from the hip or affect the hip. And we want to make sure to, we want to take a look at those areas as well. Today we're going to focus specifically on hips, but, if you guys have requests for looking at knees or looking at lower back, you can let me know. Of course, ankles as well can affect your ankles. I mean, your hips, it's just so central, right? So it really affects your whole body. What else did I want to say about that? Working on your hip mobility. Flexibility may as well, but I think mobility can be even more powerfully, depending on how you do it, of course, it can decrease pain, stiffness, and discomfort in the body overall, in your hips. Okay, so when we look at our hips, there's some different ranges of motion that we have to work with, right? So we have, just to clarify this, in case I say this later and you're like, what is she talking about? When I talk about hip flexion, I'm talking about either like I'm lifting my knee, that would be one version of hip flexion, or like a hinge, okay, would be hip flexion. So I'm creating that crease in my hips. I'm bringing my torso and my thighs like closer together with hip flexion, okay? If I'm talking about hip extension, I'm talking about like when I stand up here, that's hip extension. I'm talking about the hips, fully extending, being kind of in line with the body, okay? Or this would also be like hip extension, right? I'm extending that hip into the furthest range of motion it can in that direction. Then, of course, we also have abduction of the hip, which would be if your hip moves out from the midline of your body, that would be abduction. And adduction is when the hip is coming in towards the body, okay? So that's why you generally call, these muscles that work to lift your leg out, those are your abductors. There's groups of muscles involved in that. And the muscles that come in, your inner thigh muscles, a lot of those are adductors, okay? So that's easy way I've always thought about, I learned it somewhere about how to remember is like the leg is coming into the body. It's like adding to the body, and then abduction is going out. And then we also have rotation, okay? So your hip is a ball and socket joint, okay? And that means that there is rotation that is happening with that ball and socket. So a simple example would be this way is internal rotation. This way is external rotation, right? Same if your leg were straight, internal, external, internal, external. Most of us have pretty limited internal range of motion. I definitely have, I think, even less on this side, but that's something that is important to work on because often is neglected or forgotten about when it comes to training the hips. Okay, so the types of exercises we use to improve mobility. So I kind of think of it like this. There's range of motion exercises like joint mobility. For example, for your neck, that's like, doing a little movement through the different ranges of motion of the neck. Okay, so joint mobility, that's one way that you can help increase your mobility. Why? Because you're kind of mapping the range of motion to your nervous system, helping you feel more comfortable and helping you tune into how do you move your joints and your muscles through different ranges of motion. Okay, how do I internally and externally rotate the hip? If you don't know how to even do it, then you can't really start strength training it. So that's part of why joint mobility is important. Then we're gonna have isometrics, okay? Isometric contraction is contracting without moving. So if I'm like pushing my fist into my hand, but I'm not actually moving, my muscles are still working, right? That's an isometric contraction. Isometrics can be really useful, especially low level, like gentle isometrics, really helpful in terms of improving our mobility and improving our end range. So extending the amount that we have access to of our range of motion. Eccentrics, so that's like a lowering. So for example, the eccentric of a bicep curl, I'm giving upper body examples because that's what I'm showing in the frame right now. But for a bicep curl, for example, your eccentric is when you lower down, right? This is the eccentric, okay? And sometimes if we're not able to do the concentric, we can still do the eccentric. So that's something you can do with weightlifting. You can kind of overload your eccentric in order to make your concentric stronger. So for example, you take a heavy dumbbell that you couldn't actually curl up, but you could slowly lower it down, and over time that will help give you more strength on the way up. So similar with mobility, if you can't contract in the concentric in the way up, you may still be able to contract in the eccentric, and that can help you build the strength, because again, mobility is just strength through your range of motion. So isometrics, really great way, eccentrics, isometrics also. Then there would be like repetitions to help you to have access throughout that full range of motion. Often slow repetitions are great for getting good control. And that's how strength training can actually be mobility training, okay? Is you can do repetitions throughout a range of motion, and that can actually help you improve your mobility if you're working in the range of motion that you want to gain better access to. And finally, loaded repetitions, okay? And so that's actually more accurately strength training. I guess the repetitions would be more like body weight, and then there's the loaded repetitions. But you could also do loaded eccentrics, loaded isometrics, and things like that. I covered loaded stretching. I talked about loaded stretching in another live last week, so if you guys want to know a little bit more about loaded stretching, go catch that replay. Just go to my profile, hit the live tab, and you'll find it there. Okay, so yeah, any questions about mobility so far, about hip mobility, about anything I talked about? Otherwise, we're gonna go ahead and warm up with some joint mobility, and then I'm gonna take you through 5 different ways, 5 different like positions or stretches that you can use to stretch and strengthen your hip flexors. And for each of those, there's going to be, I'm gonna show you like an isometric that you could work. I'm going to show you an eccentric you could work there, range of motion reps you could do, or loaded reps that you could do in order to work on your mobility in that position. So it's going to be a fun time. Hopefully you're ready to get a little sweat on. You don't necessarily need anything, any equipment. I may use a dumbbell or a kettlebell or something to show you the loaded version, but likely if you've never done the exercise before, you probably shouldn't load it the first day. I wouldn't recommend it. So you're gonna be fine with just follow along with the body weight versions. All you need is some space on the floor in order to join me, okay? So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to drop them in the chat and I will answer them kind of as we go or at the end. All right, so we're gonna start off with some joint mobility. We're gonna start out with pelvic tilts. You guys know that I love pelvic tilts if you've watched any of my lives before, and this is really important for your hips as well. If your pelvis moves well, your hips are going to be happier. So you're gonna go ahead and lift your booty up, contracting the lower back, and then you're gently going to tuck under, engage your lower abdomen, okay? So pelvic tilt, really important exercise. Seeing if you can keep your booty relaxed as you do these. You'll notice this is, what this is doing, right, is tipping us into a little bit of hip flexion. And then as we contract the lower abs, we're coming into hip extension, okay? Just practicing our hip mobility vocab here. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and do some hikes. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna keep your, this position with your booty sticking out, but you can straighten both your legs, and then you're gonna just bend one knee and lift the hip of the other. So you should feel a bigger contraction on the lower back on that side, and then the other side, okay? Big contraction on the lower back. Feels really good. Just gentle contraction. Don't necessarily need to be squeezing really hard because you're probably gonna end up cramping your lower back, and you don't wanna do that, especially not in the warm-up. Okay, then what we're gonna do is you're going to tuck your tailbone under, okay? Again, glutes are relaxed. Same idea, our lower abs are engaged, so when we bend one knee and lift the other side of the pelvis, we're gonna really engage the abs here. Engage the abs, engage the abs, engage the abs. Really simple core exercise you can do. Don't even need to get down on the floor. Good, then we're gonna combine all those and you're gonna do some circles. So you're gonna come around. Okay, so this is combining these, and this one, it will really also help you with dancing. You're welcome. It's essentially a dance move I'm teaching you, but it's also really important for having good control of the muscles around the pelvis. Dancers have incredible mobility because they practice their mobility with every dance. Oh, that was great timing by the cat. Switching directions. And if this is really challenging for you, if you can't make the circle smooth, that's okay. It takes practice. Oh, he wants to be petted. Can't resist. All right. Next up, good boy. Next up, we're gonna do some hip circles, okay? So feet hip width are a little bit wider, okay? Just simple, get the hips warmed up. You're gonna make a circle and then reverse direction. Circle, circle. Good, one more each direction. Good, okay, next one we're gonna do, you may want something to hold on to for balance. I said you didn't need anything. You don't necessarily need like a stick like this, but if you have a chair or a wall, something you can hold on to, that may be useful for you on this one. Or you could try to balance, but that's gonna make it a little bit harder for you. So what we're gonna do is a hip car. So what that is just we're gonna control the articulation of your hip. So you are going to lift your knee, you're gonna bring it just kind of across your midline, okay, for adduction. You're gonna lift it up into flexion, okay, then you're gonna open it up for abduction, and then you're going to internally rotate your hip. So we turn that knee in, we're through our extension, okay, and then we kick it back a little bit. So there, you're gonna extend the hips, squeeze your booty up, and bring it back across the body. Okay, we're gonna do it 2 more times. across. You're gonna try to make it as smooth as possible and try not to really like lean over to compensate with the rest of your body. Try to just focus on the range of motion of your hip. And if it's not a lot, that's okay. You also want to make sure to avoid any pain. So if you feel pain, reduce the range of motion so that this is pain-free for you. Okay, we're going to switch to the other side. So again, this joint mobility starts to map this stuff in your brain with your nervous system so you understand what muscles have to work to make different things happen with your hip. Okay, so this is a great way to get more body aware so that your other mobility exercises are more effective. Has to start with that mind-muscle connection. Otherwise, well, it's going to be really difficult to do any of the rest of it with much success. Good. Okay, so now we're going to focus a little bit on warming up our internal and external rotation, and again, developing that mind-muscle connection and noticing what's happening in your hip. Okay, so you're going to lift your knee up. It doesn't need to be real high. You can keep it lower if that's easier for you. Okay, and try not to hike your pelvis. It's really easy to hike your pelvis and to fake how much internal rotation you have, but that doesn't really help you get better in tune with your internal hip rotation. Okay, so what you're going to do, just move your foot out. You're going to feel some contraction in the muscles here, and then you're going to turn it in, and you may feel contraction a little bit more towards the outside of your leg, or maybe here in the top of your hip. Okay, we're just going to do that 5 times. Again, try not to hike your hip. Try to keep your hip down. Doesn't matter if it's not a lot of range of motion. Uh-oh, we've got a machinery starting outside. I got to close my window. Yep, that's the beauty of lives. And it's really hot in here, so now this is gonna be worse for me, but hey, it's okay. All right, make sure you're not hiking that hip up, so drop the hip down, internal, external. You can see I have a big difference between my internal and external rotation here. Some people just naturally have more or less, and some of us may have really trained one and not the other. That's okay. All right, now we're going to do some lower leg circles. This is also going to engage our internal and external rotation a little bit. It's really going to engage a lot of the hip, even though we're circling the lower leg. Okay, so you're just going to lift up, and you're going to do like a ankle and lower leg circles. You're kind of circling your ankle around the knee, but you'll notice there's some internal and external rotation of the hip happening. So another good one. Just get more in tune with what's going on in that hip. Reverse it. Good. Switching sides. Okay, lower leg, I should say lower leg and ankle circles. You could do without the ankle, but might as well get like a little more bang for your buck, right? By rotating your ankle too. Reversing it. All right, so last one we're going to do just a little extra warm up for our quads and hip flexors. Okay, because when we're doing hip mobility, we're not just going to be isolating it to like the front of the hip. The hips, because we got the ball and socket joint, we got the pelvis, like all the muscles, all the leg muscles are going to be involved here as we're working our hip mobility. Okay, so what we're going to do is you're going to go into hip flexion, and then you're going to extend your leg. Okay, and if you need to do it lower, that's easier. Okay, you can do it lower. We'll just do it 5 times because this is a tough one. Really good one though to strengthen your hip flexors and your quadriceps. All right, we're gonna take a little breather. That's our warm up there. If you guys have any questions, Let me know in the chat. Otherwise, we're gonna get into our exercises for the hips. I told you I've got 5 different positions that I wanna go through, okay? So actually, I might have been wrong. You might need whatever you were holding on to for balance for this first one. I forgot to tell you that. You do actually need something to hold on to. Somebody said, that's a great stick. Yep, this is an awesome stick. It's like a purple heartwood. It's a martial arts staff. It's by a company called Scrapwood Martial Arts. He hand makes them all. Highly recommend. We have a bunch of these. Love them. All right, so we're gonna start off with hip flexion, okay? So oftentimes people complain of like their hip flexors being tight. And so all day long they kind of think, okay, I just need to stretch like this. And if I just stretch like this, okay, I feel that stretch in my hip, my hips are gonna be less stiff, okay? Not necessarily. Sometimes your hips hurt or are stiff because you need more strength in them. Okay, so while stretching can be useful, you also need to make sure that you are strengthening. And one way we can do that, as we just noticed in that last warm-up exercise, is by working our hip flexion, right? By working our strengthening the hip flexors here on the front. So we're gonna go through, as promised, isometrics, eccentrics, range of motion, and loaded. So one way that you can work on your hip mobility, and specifically on hip flexion, is simply by doing a hold, okay? So, thinking I want to start my timer over here just so I'm not counting. All right, so we're gonna start a timer over there. We're gonna start with just a 20-second hold, okay? And you can modify this. You can start it by just holding it low here if that's really challenging for you. Obviously, the higher you hold, the harder it gets, okay? So I'm gonna aim for about keeping my knee about hip level. We're gonna hold for 20 seconds. Again, you don't need a staff per se. You could hold onto a chair, a wall, something that you don't have to worry about balance. Because if we're worried about balance, we actually can't focus on strength as much. We can't contract as hard as we want, which we don't necessarily want to contract super hard here, although it may feel that way if you've never done this before. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a try. You're gonna go ahead and lift up to your level of comfort. That standing leg is nice and straight, and we're gonna just hold here for 20 seconds. Okay, make sure you're not hiking your pelvis, so drop that side of your pelvis down. Good, and you're just breathing and holding. And you're feeling that hip flexor fire up. So this isn't isometric, right? Go ahead and slowly release. So we're gonna do the other side. This is an isometric. We're not moving, we're just holding a position. Ready, set, and go. The beauty of isometrics is they are actually easier to recover than from either concentric or eccentric repetitions. So you can recover from them faster. They're also great for like rehabbing after injuries or kind of like prehabbing to fill in some gas to you can't necessarily make sure you don't get injured, but go ahead and release to, hopefully reduce your risk of injury. Let me know how that went for you if you gave that a try. Did you like it, not like it, thought it was okay, not like it? Let me know. DJ said a hiking stick works. Absolutely, hiking stick is great. Okay, so we tried the isometric there. Now I'm going to take you through what would an eccentric here look like, okay? So for an eccentric, you would just come up and then you're going to lower nice and slow, okay? May feel pretty easy at first, but make sure that you are going nice and slow. The other way that you can increase the challenge if you're pretty mobile here is you could actually use your hands to come up a little higher and then slowly lower from there, okay? That's gonna make it harder because you're pulling yourself into a deeper range of motion than fighting to slowly lower it down from there. A little more advanced than just lifting up and lowering. So if you're first starting, I recommend just lifting up and lowering. As you get further down the road, you can work on increasing how high you're lifting that hip. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch to the other side. Technically, we're also doing a concentric by lifting it up, but the emphasis really here is on the eccentric. and you could technically kind of like try pulling your leg up, but generally it's not going to be so difficult. So it's okay to lift it up. We're just placing that emphasis again on the slow lowering and controlling that range of motion. Eccentric repetitions are actually the most damaging to your muscles. By that I just mean they take longer to recover from than either concentric or isometric exercises. Okay, so eccentric is the most challenging type to recover from, so it demands the most from your muscles, then concentric, then isometric. So if I'm going for like a little bit of a, easier workout, I'm often going to work on isometrics. It's not to say you can't make an isometric workout tough, because they absolutely can be. They can be really tough. All right, I think we got plenty of examples of that. Okay, so for range of motion with our hip mobility, that would be reps, right? Reps. We could do reps here and get some good work. And again, I'm just showing you one position for hip flexion. There's many different ways that you can flex your hip, right? So this is just one position. We could do other ones, seated on the floor, laying on our side. Lots of different ways we could do it. We could work in a hinge position. Lots of different possibilities and options, and that's also what I want to impress to you during this, is like what I'm showing you isn't the routine to make your hips stretchy and mobile. It's just some basic ways that I could show you how you can apply principles of mobility training to different positions, and you can take that and you could apply it to any position that you want to improve your hip mobility in. Maybe there's certain position that you really notice you're limited, and you want to apply these principles of working on isometrics, eccentrics, concentrics, and loaded. Okay, so for this particular one, if you wanted to load this, again, I don't recommend doing this today. If you're new to this exercise, I mean, my hips are already feeling it, and I have trained this before, so your hips are probably feeling it if you're doing this. So, not everybody may have access to this awesome, super duper tiny kettlebell, but this would be a way that you could, oops, don't drop it on your toe like I just did. This would be one way that you could load, okay, where we could load our hip flexion a little bit. You could also, use your hand to provide resistance for you. If you don't have, a weight, you could just push down onto your knee. You could also kind of hold a weight plate on your knee to help make that a little bit more challenging. Okay, maybe you have an ankle weight. You could absolutely use an ankle weight for this, but this is just going to up the ante. So again, I wouldn't recommend loading it until you have practiced everything else. And I should just say as a reminder, what I'm going through right now, like this isn't necessarily how I would structure a workout for you. Okay, this is not how I would recommend you train, is doing all of these exercises in one session. I mean, you could, but generally I'd say you probably, start by working on isometrics in different positions, okay? In different positions that are relevant to your needs and where you need to improve your hip mobility. And that may not be this position, or you may find benefit from working this position, even if it's not necessarily one that you knew you needed some extra support with. All right, that's enough of that. This is my workout today, so I'm getting a few extra reps. Okay, so that's what I'm going to cover on that standing hip flexion. Okay, great place to start if you don't know what to do as far as your hip strength and mobility. If you improve your hip flexion, that's going to be useful, right? Okay, so next position I want to tackle here, and this I might use my stick because it's useful to have something to hold on to, but you don't necessarily need one. Okay, you may need a pad for your back knee if you're sensitive So this is going to be this lunge position, because this position is probably like the most common way that I see people, I'm going to turn this way so I can kind of see look at you while I'm talking. So this is like the most common like hip flexor stretch position. Okay, so this absolutely is a place where you could just stretch, you could sink into the stretch and hold, right? So that's going to be working your flexibility more than it's going to be working your mobility. One thing that is important to keep in mind, if you're working on your, this would be working on your hip extension, right? You're working on your hip extension. If you're working on that extension, take a look at what your pelvis is doing. This is part of why we also did pelvic tilts during the warm-up. If you're doing this, you're not really stretching your hip extension, are you? You're kind of actually in hip flexion, as I mentioned before. So ideally, tuck your tailbone under, engage your core. You probably already feel a stretch on your hips if you tuck your tailbone under. And then if you need additional stretch, you can sink forward, but you're going to find you probably can't go super far before you start to lose that connection, okay? So you don't necessarily need to be going for it to visually look like you're really deep into the stretch to get a big stretch. At least I know for me, I don't. Like, I'm already feeling a big stretch in my hip here. Okay, so you can stretch there, but you can also strengthen, right? So we talked about isometrics. Sorry, I'm getting all the words confused. Isometric, eccentric, repetitions, and loaded. So there's different ways that you can train this lunge position as well. You know, you can be trying to get as far forward as you can. You could train it with the back leg lifted, but that's going to be more of a intensive exercise. So to start, we just look here, and a way that we could think about working isometrics in this position is, number one, and it can help to have a staff, is tucking that tailbone under and contracting your glute, okay? So you can kind of push into the staff and just contract, and don't contract as hard as you possibly can. I think like 25% effort is going to be plenty, okay? You can just kind of contracting that glute and then relax like 10 seconds, and then you can see if you can kind of like get a little bit further into that range of motion, and you could repeat that, contracting. Now the other type of contraction you can do is kind of the opposite contraction. How I think of that is, instead of squeezing the glute and pushing forward and contracting here, contracting with the front of the hip. And how can we think about that is we can think about the knee, this knee, without moving it, pushing that way, and the front foot pulling back that way. So kind of like we're taking this leg and this leg, and we're kind of going like that, but we're not actually moving, okay? So that, when you do that correctly, you're going to notice you're firing up more of the front of this hip, right? And this is where kind of doing like contract release can be helpful, okay? Where you contract in the opposite direction. If you're trying to increase your range of motion this way, you can actually contract in the opposite direction, then relax, and then contract in this direction. And sometimes you'll actually get you'll be able to increase your range of motion, okay? Kind of contract, relax. Okay, so that's how we can work some isometrics here. If we want to work eccentric, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to say was if you're working on increasing your range of motion with your lunge, like in getting lower on your lunge, that's also an area where you could work using something like a staff or a chair for support, where you could work an isometric, okay? So if you only can kind of get down to here, you can work an isometric and use that staff to kind of help you build strength to hold yourself there. And that has good carryover to getting deeper into your range of motion, okay? So if you are doing an eccentric, like for getting lower to the floor, that would be like slowly lowering and using something to support you so that you can get all the way to the floor by removing some of your body weight. If you're thinking about getting lower this way, okay, that might look like just slowly lowering down, okay, and then pushing back. Again, sort of just an emphasis on that eccentric and then pushing back. Okay, and then there's range of motion. So if you were on the floor, maybe you're just doing reps back and forth. Okay, if you're working on getting lower, right, you would just be doing reps, maybe just within your range of motion, or using something to reduce the body weight so that you could actually get lower. And then for loaded, of course, you could add weight to your lunge. You could add either in this position, you could, this position, I feel like it wouldn't necessarily help. Well, I guess you could hold a weight. You could hold a weight and see if that helps kind of pull you into a position. You could hold a weight at your side, and that would probably help. I feel like I didn't think this one out real good when I planned this, so I apologize if it's a little confusing. Okay, so same on this side, working isometrics. Remember, watch out for this, right? So tuck under, you're gonna feel that stretch, okay? And then you can do some contract. Contract the glute, holding for about 10 seconds. Releasing, seeing if you can sink just a little bit deeper into your stretch. And then maybe trying the other one where you kind of push this way and engage the front of your hip here. Again, working on some strength in the front of the hip in this position. And then maybe contracting the glute and seeing if you can get just a little bit deeper without giving up that pelvis position. Okay, keeping that pelvis as tucked as you can. Slowly lowering and then out. Emphasis on that eccentric phase. All right, and repping it out, regular speed. So adding some isometrics, slow tempo can be really helpful to focus on building some strength in that position and not just stretching. Yes, you can do a lot with this staff. It is really helpful for mobility. Actually have a whole program that focuses on mobility with a staff. It's called the Staff Mobility Program. If you guys want to check it out, let me know. I can send you the link. Okay, so now we're going to talk. This next one, we're gonna leave the staff and we're gonna talk about shin box position. You guys might have seen this on social media. It looks like this. There's also a 90-90, which is essentially, it's kind of like a more advanced version of the shin box. Okay, so 90-90 here, or shin box is going to be a little bit easier, or you could find somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter. Ideally, you're not feeling like a ton of, you're not feeling like cramping in this hip, okay? If this hip feels like, I can't hold this, you need to come closer to the shin box. Okay, so in this position, again, we can work isometrics, we can work eccentrics, we can work range of motion, we can work loaded range of motion. It depends on which hip we're working on, okay? So we can work on this front hip is an externally rotated position, this back hip is an internally rotated position. So we can work on either one. I'll show you a little bit of each. Hold on, we got a blocking to do. All right, blocking completed. Okay, so we're gonna focus on this front leg to start on external hip rotation. Okay, so how can we work external hip rotation on this front leg? So external rotation would be like this, right? So to externally rotate my hip more, I would need to go to like this. To internally rotate, I would need to like push my lower leg down into the ground. Okay, so that's going to be relevant here because as we do isometrics, we are going to think about first contracting in the opposite direction, so like going into your internal rotation, and then we'll do some isometrics in external rotation, okay? So sometimes it can be really useful to do contracting in the other direction and then contracting into the same direction and being able to access those muscles a little bit better, okay? And it can be easier sometimes to feel with the internal rotation, and then that'll help you better feel that external rotation. So what you're going to do is you're going to push down, push your lower leg down into the ground. So don't lift your knee, keep your knee down, but push a little bit more with your ankle and think 10 to 20% effort. Okay, so staying up nice and tall is going to be easier. Leaning back will be even easier. The further you lean forward, it's going to be harder, okay? So we're pushing down. Now we're going to do an isometric into external rotation. So you're going to push your knee down into the ground. You can even take your hand down onto the floor and push that knee, and imagine you could lift your foot. You're unlikely to actually be able to lift your foot, okay? That's why it's an isometric. But you're trying to lift your foot, and you should kind of feel this contraction here, maybe on the outside of your thigh, in your glute. Okay, that's your muscles that are working to help externally rotate your hip. Okay, go ahead and relax. We're going to do a few more with just the external rotation contraction or isometric contraction. Okay, again, 10 to 20%. It may not feel like a lot, or it may feel really intense. It just varies from person to person. Okay, so go ahead, push your knee down into the ground. Imagine you were going to lift your foot up off the floor. And you can hold this for varying lengths of time. You can increase that length of time as your muscles get stronger, or you could like make it harder by getting deeper into the range of motion, right? Holding for 3, 2, 1, relax. Okay, we're going to do that one last time. Then I'm going to show you how you could work some eccentrics. And again, these aren't necessarily things you would work at the same time, because the eccentric may not be accessible to some if they don't have the proper progression yet, so it may be something you work on later down the road. Okay, so go ahead and push your knee down, isometrically contracting. It does really help me to sometimes just place my hand on my knee and push down into my hand gently for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there we know how to start to work on isometrics and external rotation. Again, this is just one position you can train your external rotation in. You could train it in other ways as well, right? As simple as like you could be here and you could go this way. And this would be, you know, externally rotating and doing an isometric in your external rotation. Okay, so now for our eccentric, and again, this one I mentioned, you may need to have more range of motion in order to do this one, but you can work on hinging forward slowly, okay, and then using your hands to push up so you can focus on the effort on the way down. Okay, so you're likely going to feel this really loaded in the outside of your hip, okay, and this is going to get more challenging the more you go out into like a 90-90 position. This is going to be more intense and more challenging there. For a lot of these, you don't need a lot of reps to really feel it. You really don't. Good. Okay, so then range of motion. There's a few ways that you could work on your range of motion for this. So you could work on here. Okay, so we could work range of motion here or here, right? We could also work our range of motion by kind of backing out. So I could go back and, well, I don't quite have enough range of motion. I was gonna say you could lift your foot and lower it back down, but I think I would have to come into a different position in order to do that. Okay, but you could work something like this as well to work on your range of motion where you're moving into external rotation of the hip. Again, there's many ways to do this in many different positions. And then if you wanted to load it, if you wanted to load this one, for example, you could grab something like a dumbbell or a weight plate. And again, you want to make sure you practice this with body weight first, but you could work on loading it. If you wanted to do the other one that I showed where you're moving your leg back and forth, that would be like you could put a, like if you had a light ankle weight, okay, you could put a light ankle weight and work towards that. For a lot of mobility training, you do not need a lot of weight, okay? You do not need a lot of weight. You can use just a little bit of weight and feel a big difference. Okay, so then in this position, we can also work on our internal rotation for the back hip, okay? And again, we can do that either in the 90-90 or in this tighter shin box. I recommend starting with the shin box if you can, okay? So again, the further, and now with this one, the further we lean this way, okay, the easier it's going to be if we sit up straight. It's going to be harder if we turn and rotate towards the hip. We're putting ourselves kind of deeper into internal rotation, so it's going to be harder. So for isometrics, we can start with doing an opposing contraction and then contract into our internal rotation. So remember, internal is this way, okay, rotating the hip this way. External is pushing the foot down into the floor to go that other way, okay? So we're going to first do an external rotation, about 10 seconds. So what I want you to do is push your lower leg into the ground and push your knee down, but push your ankle down a little bit harder. Don't let your knee come up. And you're likely going to feel kind of this band up here is going to turn on, okay? And again, gentle. If you contract too hard, you may cramp your hip. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now into internal rotation. So you're gonna, again, sit as tall as you can and try not to like lean or lift your butt off the ground. Try to lift your foot off the ground. Okay, so when you do that, you're gonna light up what I call like the icky band here and into your upper glute and into your hip. Okay, that thing is going to fire up like nobody's business trying to internally rotate your hip, even if you're contracting gently. Hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Gently release. You're welcome. You didn't even know what it felt like to internally rotate your hip, but now you know. We're going to do a couple more, just internal rotation. Okay, so go ahead and try again. Try to lift your foot. Okay, but you're not actually going to be able to move your foot. If you can, then you can move your foot further back. Okay, make it a little bit harder. Hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. Sometimes this can be a hard one to feel. So as we do this last one, something you can try is kind of take your hand under your thigh and go like this and then resist against it. Okay, so go ahead and try that. You're kind of resisting against that hand that's kind of trying to slide across like this. Hopefully that helps you get a little bit more activation there. Holding for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And relax. Okay, so some other ways we can work on eccentric here. Okay, you can work on, you can lift, use your hand to lift, and then slowly lower. You may need support from your hand. This may be like a supported eccentric because it's going to be pretty tough. Okay, lift up and then slowly lower, and you're going to feel that same kind of band turn on, up, slowly lower. And one more. Good. As for reps for this one thing that you could do, if you are able to access it, is you can lean out to the side. And when I do that, I'm able to lift and get into that internal rotation a little bit. Okay, so that's one way you could do it. You could also just be up on your hand if you're able to do that. So that would be just working our repetitions, working our control. Okay, and if you wanted to load this, of course, so one thing you could do is just push down as you lift up. Okay, so it'd be one way where you could just use your own body to provide some extra load, or you could do something like place a weight plate on your foot and hold it and add some load there that way. Okay, so, whew, okay, feeling those hips. We're gonna do the same thing on the other side to even it out. John said, this is awesome. Keep it up. Thanks, John. I appreciate that. Hope this is helping you and everybody else who's watching today. Okay, so go other side. Whew, feeling that in my hip. I'm feeling those internal rotations. Let's actually start on internal rotation because this hip is still feeling it. I don't know about you, but we're going to start on internal because this leg got to rest, right? So we're going to start off with that isometric, okay? This is my kind of tighter side, so it just feels less comfortable overall. So you may need to make a little bit of an adjustment for each side. Okay, so we're gonna start with contracting into external rotation. So push your lower leg down, push your knee down, push your ankle down, but now push your ankle down a little bit harder, like 25% effort. Okay, and you're just gonna hold that contraction. You actually wanna feel that a little bit more in your glute and maybe in your hamstrings, depending on whether you're in the shin box like me or if you're in the 90-90. If you feel any pain or discomfort in your knee, don't contract as hard. Okay, go ahead and relax. Okay, now we're going to contract into that internal rotation. So I'm going to kind of take my hand and push against that. I'm trying to lift my foot off the ground for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, if you want to make it a little bit more challenging, if you actually can lift your foot off the ground, slide your foot out to a little bit more of like having like a 90-degree angle there. It's going to make it harder. So go ahead and try again. Push down. If you need that hand to give you a little bit of support, you should feel that kind of in this band along the top of your hip and maybe into the top of your glute. Hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. We're going to do that one more time. And go. Good, keep holding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Very nice. We're gonna go into that eccentric. So you're gonna lift up and then slowly lower with support from that hand as needed. I don't know about you guys, but I feel this one a lot. Ooh, it's rough. Oh, okay. All right, we're gonna do our reps. Okay, so come out to the side. I'm gonna need to lay down on this side because I don't have as good range of motion on this side. Okay, doing repetitions. Doesn't matter though if it's not huge range of motion. It's just that you're working on gaining better understanding and control of that range of motion. All right, great. This side is a little bit pooped out. Now we're ready to go to the front side again. Okay, so we're going to start off with that opposing contraction, pushing your knee and your ankle down, but push your ankle down a little bit harder. Okay, again, 25% effort here. Breathing and holding as you're pushing down into the ground, firing up this outside part of your hip for 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and relax. Now we're going to try to externally rotate. So you're going to push your knee down, attempt to lift your foot off the ground. You can push your hand under your knee and push your knee into that hand. Good. Holding 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sometimes when you're first starting, it may be helpful to do a longer isometric so that you can feel it more. Sometimes I know that happened for me when I was started. 10 seconds wasn't quite enough for me to fire up the muscles and feel them, so you're welcome to do 20 seconds or 30 seconds if you like. For brevity's sake on this live, we're gonna go ahead and just do 10 seconds, okay? So go ahead and again, try to externally rotate, push the knee down, try to lift the foot up, so we're pushing down and lifting up. Trying to rotate that hip, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, releasing. One more time here. Go for it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so for that eccentric, one thing we can do, and again, you can support with this with your hands as well. You're gonna slowly lower down, engaging these muscles on the outside of the hip, and then just push yourself up with the arms, okay? Or if you're ready for it, you can slowly lower down, which is technically loaded. We're not using a weight, but it's technically loaded. Slow lower and push up. Slow lower and push up. If you want to add a weight, one way you could do it, right, is holding a dumbbell as you do that. Well, first we're going to do regular speed reps, right? And again, you can also support this. If you're not ready for your full body weight, you can work regular speed reps here, pushing the leg into the ground as you come up. And then, I was getting ahead of myself, then here, right? Good. All right. And it's time to release. Whew, my hips are going to be feeling that tomorrow. This is strength training. I'm telling you, mobility is strength. Let me know how you guys are doing out there. Thumbs up if you're still with me. It's already 4:25. Normally I do an hour. Still have 2 other ones I haven't covered. If you would like me to continue and cover a little bit more, let me know in the chat. Otherwise, we could cover it in a future live. So let me know what you guys think. No thoughts? All right, we'll real briefly go over the other 2 positions. We may not do everything, but I'm going to just show you how I'll tell you how to do it. Okay, Elena says more, please. Okay, so the next one is a single leg frog stretch. So for this one, you have like 1 leg straight, 1 leg bent, okay? So how low you go on this one depends on your range of motion. Okay, so up on your hands is going to be easier. You know, if you have more range of motion and you want to go down onto your forearms, you can. It's up to you. Okay, you don't want to be in like your very deepest range of motion because it may be hard to contract. Okay, so the goal of this stretch, right, is we're trying to get deeper into we're trying to abduct both of our legs. Okay, so we're trying to like get our legs out wider, right? So we're stretching kind of the inside here. So if we're working one way, there's different ways in this stretch how you could work your isometrics and your range of motion. But one way that you could work your isometric here is you could contract the straight leg. Okay, so you could contract like as if you were going to lift the leg off the ground, you contract it. Okay, so you're feeling your glute, your hip here all fire up as you're trying to contract. Maybe you're just contracting, like you're trying to straighten your leg, but you're also attempting to lift it up, okay? And again, 25% effort, hold for about 10 seconds, and then you relax. And sometimes after that relaxation, you're gonna find you naturally just sink a little bit deeper into the stretch, okay? That's kind of the theory behind like PNF stretching, that with the contract release, you can actually get your muscles to kind of release and relax and go deeper. Okay, so we'll try that again a couple more times. So contract, imagine you were going to lift that leg off the ground without moving any of the rest of your body. Okay, holding for 5, 4, we got a cat, 3, 2, 1, relax, sink into that stretch. What a great little stretching buddy you are. Oh, you're so cute. He wants his afternoon snack that he's getting after this. All right, one more time. Oh, he got scared. Contract, he knew the next set was coming. Contract and breathe, holding for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. Okay, so one way that we can work our eccentric here, so our concentric is essentially that we're getting deeper into the stretch. I had to think about it for a second, okay? Our eccentric is this way, okay? So one way that we could work our eccentric is what I just did, okay? So this might be if you're on a hardwood floor or tile, you wanna have like a sock on. If you're on carpet, you may wanna have something you could slide, a paper plate, a slider, or something like that can be useful. We could slide in, okay? So our kind of inner thighs are contracting into the ground and we're building strength through our range of motion. Okay, and actually sliding in and out can be a pretty powerful exercise for this position, okay, where you're slowly, and that would be our reps, I guess, would actually be more so. So our eccentric would be more like, you know, we're working that slow emphasis on the eccentric, move your leg out again, emphasis on that eccentric. And then for our reps, it can be really helpful to, again, have a slider or a sock where you're going in and out. For this one, honestly, you're unlikely to need really a load, I think. But you know, if you wanted to have a partner who provided you some resistance or put a plate on your hips, I guess you could, but it's probably not one that I would really load, honestly. Probably is not Not necessary for most of us. We just still be working on this range of motion. You can also work on this leg as well, similar to what we're doing on this straight leg. And DJ said, I've got natural load. Yeah, right. We've all got our body weight in our hips. All right, so our isometrics here on the other side. Go ahead and switch sides if you haven't yet. You may want to take a break between sides. It can get tiring on your arms, okay? So go ahead and contract. Imagine you're going to lift that foot off the ground, holding 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe you relax into that stretch a little bit further. I feel like it actually feels a little better up on my hands. So, okay, we'll do a couple more. Okay, imagine we're going to lift that leg. Just contract the glutes and the hips, quads. Good, holding 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relaxing. And again, you don't necessarily need to be in as deep of a range of motion as I am. Wherever you're able to access, you can work on this. And one more time, isometric, try to lift, hold 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good for that eccentric, sliding it up. Okay, bringing yourself back out, sliding it up, pushing into the floor for emphasis. Nice and slow is the way to go. DJ said it couldn't possibly go as deep as you are. You know what, it's really not that important how deep you're going, because even just a little improvement in your range of motion can do a lot for how you feel. So that doesn't matter so much. Okay, and then you could do your reps in and out. And again, you're unlikely to need to add any additional load, I don't think. I don't think you'll need it, at least not for a long time. Okay, last one we're going to go over is a seated forward fold. So this one is going to be working your hip flexion again. Okay, so because I think this is a common one for people that, and they maybe think of this as a hamstring stretch, which it is, but it's also hip and quadricep strength, okay? In order to better facilitate stretch of the hamstrings, you need to have strong hips and quads in this position, okay? So of course, if you struggle to ever get to like touching your toes in this position, or you really struggle in this position, I think this is going to help you. So what we want to do for this one is, one way that we could do an isometric is we can come into whatever position we can, whether that's back here, if it's a little bit harder for you, straight up, or if you can reach forward, okay, whichever position, you're going to contract your quadriceps and your hip flexors. So just like you're trying to straighten out your legs as much as you can, you're just going to contract and hold. And that's going to be our isometric for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. And this is where, if you're kind of back here, isometrics may be the way to work on this position, okay? Where you can just work on contracting and that's going to help you build strength to get further forward. Okay, we'll do a couple more. Contract 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Relax. We got one more, last one, and go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so for our eccentrics, there's a couple different ways we can go here. So one of them, if you have the range of motion, you can work on going through, well, this is more just like working your range of motion, really, and you could do slow range of motion. But actually, I think in some ways the better eccentric in this position would be a single leg option, which is going to be well, it's a little bit hard to just isolate eccentric on this one. So this is probably just reps. Going to be a little bit more, because you're technically going to be, you could do like a slow, like an eccentric focus like we talked about, right? So, but first you're going to want to start with just the range of motion on this. So that would be like a leg lift, okay, with each side, because it's not as heavy doing 1 and 1, right? Or you can do multiple reps on one side. It doesn't need to be high in order for you to feel it. Don't be a hero and try to go as high as you can if you've never done it before, because your hip flexors may cramp. Warning, you may cramp, which isn't dangerous, but it's just very uncomfortable. Okay, you could do an eccentric focus with that one by lifting up and slowly lowering down. Lifting up and slowly lowering down. Lifting up, slow, lowering, lifting up, slow, lowering. Another way to train isometrics here, if you are able to come forward, okay, if you've gotten past the point of you can't, you kind of like this, right? As you work on isometrics and you may need to work on your flexibility a little bit there. Once you are able to lean forward a little bit, doing an isometric, if that's just right here, okay, contracting your legs and contracting those hip flexors to pull you into the stretch, okay? If you are able to get lower, okay, contracting your muscles. So that means, again, that contraction we did earlier where you try to straighten out your legs, okay? Contract and hold there. Another great way where you're just solidifying your control of that range of motion, okay? Another way, if you have more range of motion, you can work reps here. Okay, but if you're still working on just getting towards being able to lean forward, then, doing leg lifts can be a great way to start to build the strength there that's needed, and working on getting your seat bone shifted back so you can sit upright. You can use a wall to help you get in that position, hold and stretch. In that case, there may need to be some flexibility work done before you can do some of those other mobility drills. All right, so we got through our 5 positions. It didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take. Let me know if you have any questions, if you got any comments. I'd love to hear what you thought if you gave those exercises a try. And just a quick reminder that tomorrow I'm going live again. Going live a 4th time this week. Shout out to DJ. She donated a super that made me add an extra live this week. So we're doing a full body kettlebell workout as per her request tomorrow at 10 a.m. So be sure to join us for that full body kettlebell workout. You just need at least 1 light to moderate weight kettlebell. If you have a few, that's even better. South to West, you said all right. Did that mean that it went all right for you? And since it is Thursday, I usually take topic requests on Thursday. If you have topic requests for next week, let me know. If you want to see more mobility workouts like this, let me know. Elena said, thank you, Brittany. You're welcome, Elena. Thank you for joining. Southwest said, all right, to the 4th live stream tomorrow. All right, get your kettlebell ready. Get a kettlebell. We want you to join us. Southwest still needs to get his kettlebell. If you guys are able to drop a super, it's really appreciated. If not, that's okay. I'm here to connect with you guys and help as best I can. Let me know what topics you want to see for next week. If you have topic requests, I love to take those into account when I choose my live topics. But if you don't tell me, I just go wild and choose whatever topic I feel like talking about or showing you. And who knows, you might not even be interested. So you help me out when you let me know what topics you'd like to see live streams on. So that, because you're just representative of a bunch of people, so I'm sure there's other people that want to know whatever you also want to know. Any other questions about mobility, about hip mobility, about stretching and strengthening your hips, kettlebells, fitness, or anything in general? Drop them in the chat. All right, we got a like. We like that. Thank you for the like. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. I go live usually 3 times a week. Mondays at 1 p.m. Pacific time, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time, although sometimes it's 11, depending on the week, and Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, as well as this week I'm having a bonus live tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time, so I hope to see you there with the full body kettlebell workout. Hi, Roberts, thanks for joining. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions, in which case I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope to see you tomorrow, but if not, have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you soon.